All right, so welcome everybody. We very much appreciate you joining us today. It's a strange time right now. We've got the confluence of two unbelievable events in our life with the coronavirus and shutdowns and all of the riots and protests and everything that's happening around the country. Most importantly, we hope that you and your families and everyone are safe and healthy and well. We fully recognize that commercial real estate and buildings and things that we're talking about today are not necessarily the forefront of everything going on today, but we've had a lot of you ask for this particular discussion, and so we certainly wanted to deliver. We're really excited. Just to give a recap, this is our fourth Zoom webinar that we've given or that we've done. We started with rent deferrals and an attorney client of ours. We had two of our most noteworthy colleagues on from San Francisco and New York on. We have to talk about the overviews there. We've gone to the head of workplace, Roy Abernathy, who, one of my favorite stories is that he has 2 degrees in architectural and zoonotic diseases and infectious diseases. So like he said, he waited his whole life for that call. And today we're really excited about who we have on, Chris Rising from Rising Realty Partners and Russ Allegrette from Ocean West. We are incredibly excited. Chris Rising comes from a long lineage of real estate development, certainly in Southern California. One of the first creative office landlords is how I remember them, Rising Realty, at least in downtown LA with Pac Mutual and 523 West 6th Street. They own all over the West Coast, and they're going to talk about that today, but he's certainly on the forefront of what is going on and bringing tenants and companies back right now. Russ Allegrette and the Ocean West team have developments and buildings all over the country. Russ is the former president of McGuire Investments and has really pushed the boundaries in buildings and amenities across the country, and is also really involved with kind of what's going on. One of the reasons, as they'll tell you here, that we wanted both of them on, or we're excited about it, is because they have some similar views and some different views that they'll share today on kind of what their respective companies are doing. So we're lucky enough to have partnered with them over the years, and we appreciate you guys being on. Jen?
Thank you.
Well, by the 4th time Ryan and I did this, we decided not to rehearse, and turns out he took everything I had to say. But who thought when we postponed this a week ago, because we were going to space potentially for the first time last Tuesday, that we would end up here today. So like Ryan said, thank you all for joining us. We know there's a lot going on in the world. As our Newmark president said this morning on a call, the only way really to make progress is to continue to move forward. So we hope the death of George Floyd is the last death without progress. And in addition to all of that, the pandemic continues, and our goal has always been to be a resource to you, our friends, our clients. And so like Ryan said, today we are very excited to have Chris and Russ on the web with us. And we're going to turn it over to them to give just a brief intro, and then we'll get into our questions.
Terrific. You want us to go first? I'll go first.
You can go first, Chris.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Chris, go first.
So I'm Chris Rising, and I'm CEO of a company called Rising Realty Partners. And my partner, Scott McMullen, and along with my father and I, run a company that's about 4.5 million square feet that we own, and another 1.5 million of third-party property management. We own between Denver and Southern California. We're actively looking in about 11 markets on a day-to-day basis. So we go all the way from Seattle, Portland, the 5 markets in California, and then Phoenix, Vegas, Salt Lake City, and Denver. And our focus has been heavily office, though it's also a little bit more into industrial and multifamily as we are looking at this new world that we're in. And we've got about 40 people at our company. We are vertically integrated, so we take property management extraordinarily seriously. Our asset management, we really believe that the things that we do is really a start to finish kind of catering to tenants, providing experiences, creating great places. We've really made a name, and I don't bristle at creative office references, but just adaptive reuse, trying to create places that are really experiential for people so they can be their most creative. I think we've moved past you put some purple on a wall and call it hip. We know that there's a lot more to it. Pleased to be on with Russ, whose company is a great competitor, and he's a great friend. So, Russ, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. So I'm Russ Allegrette. I'm a principal and the founder of Ocean West Capital Partners. We started about 10 years ago. We're based in El Segundo. Like Chris, we kind of made our bones in terms of looking at interesting redevelopments of space, office space. We've expanded over the years into investments in office, industrial, and student housing. We have about 11.5 million feet under management right now across the country, and we've got about 5,000 student housing beds that we have under management right now that we own, and looking forward to participating today.
Well, thank you. And before we get into, I know what most people on the call have submitted questions about, which is what's going on at your buildings and what you're doing and what your tenants are asking you. You both run companies. So what have you guys been doing for your companies since work from home began? It's much longer than any of us anticipated. How's it going?
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Russ.
Chris, I'll take it first. Look, I think it's been an interesting 10 weeks for us. I think, there's been a lot of focus on asset management. And I think that's been a good thing. I think the first part of all this was, working with tenants and understanding how they were impacted by COVID and how their businesses were disrupted, and trying to put together a protocol and a way to work through rent relief. Obviously that's a complicated thing, and it takes, there's, legal involved with it. There's relationship involved with it. There's, dialogue and understanding and process. So I'd say for the first, couple weeks to month, there was a big focus on that. I think that from our perspective, that was a positive focus. I think at the end of the day, we were actually able to communicate and talk and really understand our tenants a little bit better during that process. So we spent a lot of time on that up front. I think the last month or so has been spent trying to really figure out, okay, how are the buildings going to operate post-COVID? How are we going to reopen? How are we going to communicate with our tenants? We've spent a lot of time really thinking about how do we enact social distancing? How do we change our cleaning procedures? What kind of capital do we need to invest in our buildings, to make them safer? How do we communicate all of these to our tenants? And I think that there's a lot of fear out there, and there's not a lot of answers. So, we've tried to put in a protocol so that tenants can reach out and we can be a place for answers rather than generating more questions. So we put together a building plan for each of our buildings. All buildings are different. There's no one size fits all. And we probably spent a good month to 6 weeks just going through and really thinking about how do we best meet the client's needs, clients being the tenants, and how do we reopen safely and in the best way to meet everybody's goals.
Well, just to follow on Russ, obviously, I think he hit a lot of the key issues. I'll start with this. So, we didn't close, and we have not, and we would not close any of our buildings. So most of our property level staff are there. They're at the buildings, whether it's security, janitorial, engineering, and even parking. And so early on, we had to make that decision about how those employees were going to be safe. And it started with, we used to say a lot of high touch. Well, we're not going to be touching a whole lot these days, but we call it high frequency communication. And our property managers have really gotten to know our tenants well. And some of it has been a little unpleasant, to be honest with you, because it's a scary time out there. And some tenants have taken a more arbitrary view on their rental obligations or what's expected. And I'm really proud of our team never losing their cool and working with tenants to try to worked through a scary, scary time. You know, it's really hard to hear the story of the small sandwich shop who literally has no revenue and there's just nothing they can do. And we try very hard to work with them. But at the end of the day, I think, to be clear, I mean, a lease is a contract. Every one of our leases says that in the case of force majeure, you still have to pay rent. Even though I would not agree this is a force majeure event. But even if it is, you still have to pay rent. And those are kind of hard conversations. And we've had some very aggressive letters written to us on the landlord side, but our people who are showing up every day at the buildings are really handling it well. I'm really proud of them. We've taken about maybe half of our workforce and said work from home. And early on, it was literally from 7 in the morning until 7 at night, Zoom call after Zoom call after Zoom call. And I credit that we had a great culture. We have a great culture that we were able to do it. But yeah, here we are in June, and I'm sensing that people are tired of Zoom calls. I think there's a real want to get back. About a week ago, we made sure our office was open to anybody who wanted to come in because people are stressed from homeschooling. And, you know, it's a unique thing we're in right now, right? Everybody's available because nobody's on airplanes, nobody's taking the kids to school, nobody's got a sporting event. And so I feel like we've packed it all in with so much that I am sensing right now people are ready for something different. And what that may be, I think we're going to talk about here. But I think I do think that what we are seeing right now at this end with the what happened with George Floyd and the civil disobedience is just, I mean, what else can 2020 throw at us, right? We're well prepared to deal with things, and we've gotten through it. We have lots of properties downtown, and I didn't know how creative people could be with spray paint and the F word. But you know, I was at the properties yesterday, and we're cleaning it up, and we're boarding up, and we'll get through this too. So yeah, that's what we've been doing. I'm just proud of our team. I'm proud of the 90% of the tenants who were so respectful and working together, and I'm proud for those who are in trouble, those that we've been able to help, it breaks my heart for those that we really just can't because our situation with our lenders.
What has surprised both of you and we're going to get into, for those out there, because there's a lot of questions about cleaning, visitors, you know, notices of COVID, all that stuff I promise we're going to get into. But what has surprised you the most for over the last, you know, call it 3 months now?
Well, I'll have to say, for me, what surprised me the most was how well prepared we were. It shouldn't surprise me, but you know, we really believe in health and wellness, and you know, having hand sanitizer. It's always been there at our buildings, and now it's become more. You know, people now notice it. But what I'm surprised at is that the things that we need to do to keep people safe, outside of say 2 people in an elevator, are things that our team has been really focused on. And now the importance of them have grown. So, you know, we missed on a couple of things. I mean, I think the density issue of space is something that that was driven down, and even in our own space, we've gone back to making sure people are 6 feet apart. But I was a little surprised that we were much more, you know, when I started asking questions about thermometers or face masks or all that, we were already doing a lot of these things, or our people took it upon themselves the day this stuff happened to jump out there. So, my biggest fear the first week was we were going to not be able to find hand sanitizer anywhere or the right cleaning products anywhere. So I was pleasantly surprised how much we did have.
I think for me, it's been 2 different things. One is, if you would have told me that when we closed down in March, you know, around March 15th, that we'd still be closed June 1st, I'm surprised it's been this long. I understand it, but certainly when we went into this, I didn't expect us to be out for so long. I think the other thing that surprised me is just the divergent view on this. I mean, I've got some you know, friends that are very close, and they're very smart friends, and you know, I have just as many friends that are in the camp of, look, we got to get back to work, and this is a disease that, you know, is going to be with us for a while, and there's a long period of time before there's a vaccine, and you know, we kind of have to deal with this, and yes, it's terrible, but you know, we need to go back. Versus I've got an equal number of friends who are saying, look, I'm scared to death of this disease. And, no matter what happens financially, human life is you can't put a price on it. And these are very, very, smart people who I respect. And, for 95% of the things that we talk about, we're pretty much in agreement in terms of points of view. But I think this one is, and I think because there's not a real clear answer on how to deal with this, and I also think because, we're very polarized from a media perspective and from a point of view perspective, that, people have different views. They're both valid views, and it's something as an owner of buildings, we have to take into consideration both and, try to move forward from there. So that's been surprising to me.
Yeah.
I think Russ makes a good point about the dichotomy between the 2 points of view. I also think there's a big age difference thing going on here that is hard to recognize in the experience that a baby boomer, say a partner in a law firm, is having working from home is far different than what the 32-year-old with 4 kids or the 24-year-old with 3 roommates. And so I think people's views are really different based on the experiences they're having right now. And not as much as I thought it was going to be about what industry they were in. I think it has a heck of a lot more to do with their being at home experience about what they want to do to come back or not.
Yeah, Ryan and I were just talking about that the other day. I think so many companies for so long give out a set of benefits or a set of perks, or they do something and they're trying to capture all of the demographics. And I think this has really made obvious a lot of the differences. There is a very significant spectrum between both how people feel about this, how they feel about going back to work, how they feel about working from home, what stage they are in their lives. And so I wonder too if this is kind of a catalyst for a more specific, multi-layered approach to employees at a company, because everyone needs, it's been proven through this, everyone needs something different. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And I think as creative landlords too, not creative or adaptive reuse, whatever we're calling it, catering to not just one generation or the most prominent generation, really catering to all of the different types of people, and then managing the communication, like you said, Russ. I mean, that's a huge piece of this.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing, and it's been coming for a while, and this is just accelerating it, but we're seeing the transfer of power from baby boomers to Gen X and millennials and running companies. The Japanese idea that was very much a part of a boomer work experience of presenteeism, that FaceTime with the boss, being there at 7 a.m., staying till 7 p.m., that's all going out the window. But I hope people are recognizing that with that, what else is going out the window is your privacy. I hear more and more, including our company, we're changing the software that we have to monitor what people are doing, because there's going to be this trade-off. I don't see you in the office at 8:30. Well, I need to know what you're working and what your work product is. And then I think the other thing is, and we haven't talked about as a society yet, I think the ramifications of the hacking and the security flaws of home router systems and Wi-Fi systems and all that is going to lead to a really big discussion about what work can really be done from home and what can't. And I think that we're still in the bunker right now, right? We're still in a pandemic. We still have to wear face masks. As we start to move out of that world, whenever that may be, I think we're going to look back and go, wow, there was billions of dollars stolen online, whether it's through just unsophisticated people falling for phishing attacks, or actually, like I've heard through my YPO friends, some real coordinated attacks to steal bank accounts and brute force attacks onto servers. So, I mean, that's an element that no one's talked about yet that I think we will be talking about in the next year in the context of a mobile workforce.
I think too, like one of the commonalities that we're bringing up here in these views are, when stress like this happens, it in a lot of ways it doesn't always just create new paradigms and new ways of doing things, but it accelerates, what's been happening in the past. So, when Chris talks about, the working from home and the monitoring and phishing, and we talk about, the demographics between and the treating of millennials different than, in their needs versus that are different than Generation X, that are different than baby boomers. When we talk about, retail and the problems that retail are now having being disintermediated by the internet. And we talk about telecommuting, right? These are all things that were in process before, but now I think that those trends are accelerated. And in a way, when you have a stress like this, I think it gives you a bit of a laboratory to kind of test things and figure out, okay, how is this going to work, versus during the normal course of business. I'll take telecommuting for an example. You would never take your entire business offline for 2 months to test telecommuting. But now we've done that for the last 2 months, and we know what the good part is and we know what the warts are. And I think that there's certainly both there. But I think if we're all smart, what we probably look towards are, what are these trends and what big demographic trends have we seen changing? And we look at those and we say, look, okay, these are going to impact us even more than what they impacted us before. And the smart landlord will adapt to those, both from an investment standpoint and an operational standpoint. And then that's what we're trying to do.
So in that regard, I mean, let's talk about it then. Let's get into the nuts and bolts. I mean, do you think companies are taking more space, less space? Jen and I have talked about a net zero.
We're really invested
summit.
in your answer here, so just FYI.
We are highly invested in your answer, but I think a lot of people on the call have sent a lot of questions saying, look, and we've seen everything, but we have our own opinion, but we'd love to hear yours.
Well, I'll take it first. So look, I think that you got to look at it in two ways. One is, as Chris said, we're in the bunker right now, and we're talking pre-vaccine of COVID. So, what changes we may make now may not be a permanent shift. I think we all know the trade-offs, right? The trade-off is, how do you trade off between space loss because of telecommuting versus space gain because of de-densification?
Right.
And right now, for us, my opinion is it's too early to tell. But I do think that, I do think that the bigger impact on all of this over the near term is just going to be our economy. I mean, I think the devastation that we've had, with COVID, and just from a business perspective, from a government, in terms of budgeting perspective, state, municipal, federal, all that's going to have an impact. And I think that has more impact on new leasing than new space standards or working from home. And I'll let Chris get into, the long term, because I agree with his thought in terms of, look, you're going to have office. I mean, it's the most productive way to do things. But, I think that in the short term, in all of our projections, everything for the next 18 months is going to be slow. And I think that's more because we're in a downward cycle, we're in a recession versus there's a new paradigm because of COVID.
Yeah, I agree with Russ 100%. I think what's getting lost in all this is a recession. It's going to be a recessionary environment for at least 18 to 24 months. And if you look back at past recessions, what that means is you'll see rents decrease, you'll see vacancy go up, and you'll see people rethinking what they do, whether it's work from home or not. It's not really relevant. Remember, after the GFC, the whole talk was, what can you offshore? And so I think that's just a natural part, and in some respects, a healthy part of an economy where you get bloated and then you shed people. I've talked to a lot of people whose workforce got, they used furloughing and they used layoffs because they felt that their expenses were getting out of control in January of this year. And it was an opportunity to right-size that. I also think we're going through this this is speeding it all up, but we spent a lot of time as a company, and I ask all of you to as well, is what does it mean to work today? because if your job is predictable and repeatable and you're really just there punching a clock, I think your job's probably gone. And all these people think, well, it's great, maybe I'll just move to Boise and work in Boise. Well, boy, if it can go to Boise, it can go to Costa Rica, and it can go to India just as easily too. So we're going through, I think, a contraction in real estate use. I think at the end of the day, and I still have this image. I was in New York at WeWork's headquarters about a year and a half ago, and they were down to one person per 50 feet. The bathrooms couldn't handle it. It felt like you were in an anthill. It was awful. And I think the pushback is going to be that people need space within their space. And I think the third piece of this is business evolves. I mean, I'm not to date myself, but if you happen to see an old funny movie with Dolly Parton called 9 to 5, and you look at what that company was using office space for, huge floors of all typists who were just there typing and typing away. And, obviously business has really progressed. And I think we're going to see, because of a recession, because it makes people try new things in a recession, because of the forced work from home, you're going to see people change the way offices are used. I do really believe in team sports. I'm stealing this from Lisa Picard. Companies, for the most part, are team sports. They're not individual sports. If you're an individual sport and you lease office space, you're a freelance writer, an author, an artist. You already weren't leasing office space. That isn't there. But if you're in a team, you have to have human interaction. You have to have these creative collisions. So I think what will happen is we'll right size down to what works for a recession, and you're going to see some tremendous obsolescence in terms of office buildings. The fact is, if you don't have fast broadband into your buildings, if you can't meet tenant needs, I think the number one thing we're going to see is office hours, traditional office hours, out the window. If you can, as an owner, figure out how to meet the needs of a tenant on differentiating office hours without just saying arbitrarily after 6 you owe us $150 an hour, I think you're done in this new world, because people aren't going to work that way. And I think you're going to see more and more A and B shifts in the office environment like you would in an industrial. But as I said, I think that has much more to do with a recession after 10 years of growth and bloat and people then looking to do things differently than it does the pandemic. I think Russ and I may be a little different on that. I mean, my view is I'm cynical. I think people are going back to work and just going to make the decision, kind of like driving a car. There's drunk driving accidents, all that. It's a horrible thing. I'm not saying promote it, but if you look at the economic stress that's been inflicted on people, I think we're hitting that point where people are going to just come back to work because they need to make money, and we're going to push through this. If we have a second wave, we have a second wave. So I think all of this is going to have much more to do with this tremendous recession we're going to go through than it is just directly related to COVID change in work patterns.
Well, Ryan's believed that since day 2, that there was going to come a time when people were just going to be over this and go back. So what are we, day 80 something, Ryan? You're coming true.
Eventually it's going to come true.
So you talk about, obviously companies changing the way we work or they work, and this is kind of pre-vaccination or pre-wide adoption of a vaccination. And are you guys doing things at your building kind of to preempt this or to kind of predict what's happening, or are you kind of waiting and seeing as people start to come back to then make plans to any kind of adaptations on HVAC or other components of the building? How are you handling that?
Well, we're not doing, if you had asked me this on the first, second week, I would have told you we're going to have kiosks with temperatures. We were going to have a temperature thing. We were going to have a lot of different things. And I think we very clearly are not going to do that. It really is, our job is to keep the building open, keep the building safe, keep the building clean, and to have high communication so that people can social distance in our lobbies and our elevators. Once you're in the space, that's up to the employer, and we're not gonna touch that. I think for us, the evidence is pretty clear that this is not a surface to surface disease. It is a face mask. It is a person to person. And since the County of Los Angeles requires face masks, we will say no shirt, no shoes, no face mask. We're not going to let you in. In Denver, we're not going to take that approach because Denver's not requiring it. but it's really tough. I mean, what I don't want to do is put any of our security people in a situation where they require something of a tenant and that tenant gets irate and leads to a physical altercation. That's just not what we're going to do. But we're also going to enforce the rules that the county says we have to enforce.
Yeah, we're in the same boat. I mean, it's a slippery slope when you start regulating what the tenants do. I mean, in terms of breaching your leases or in terms of just prohibiting them from, managing their tenant or their employees in the way that they want to manage them and operating their workforce in the way that they want. So I agree with Chris. I mean, we've had a lot of discussions about, when everybody comes in the building, do we take their temperatures? And if they're above a 100.4, do we not let them in? And ultimately we're like, look, that's not our responsibility. And let alone, it's not even responsibility is the wrong word. It's, look, we don't want to be in a situation with our tenants where they've got an important client who's coming in and we're telling them that they can't come into the building. That being said, obviously, there's a lot of things that we're doing in our common areas with respect to, cleaning and in respect to investing some capital. We're going touchless with all of our fixtures. We're changing all of our buildings for that. We're trying to be proactive. We don't have many high-rise buildings in our portfolio. Most of them are low-rise, so we're going to try to, alleviate pressure on the elevators by using staircases and things like that. But I think the first step in all of this is let's be practical and let's put practical solutions in, and then down the road, in terms of changing HVAC and in terms of the big ticket capital items, I think we need to see where this goes. And, I think a little bit more evaluation is going to be necessary. One of the things that, as a property owner, I'm scared to death about is just, what is our government going to require? Our state government or our local government, when you talk about things like Title 24 or, things where the government gets involved, I do worry about the type of capital restriction or the capital requirements that they may impose upon building owners. And I think, we have to be careful that we don't push too far. I know there's some legislation out there, and it's not about capital, but it's about, tenancy, and smaller tenants may be able to disaffirm leases or renegotiate leases. And, and I think it's SB 939, which is out there. And I know that there's a lot of opposition against it, but, that is one big concern I do have when we talk about capital and health and wellness is, if the government gets too involved with that, then it just may make California a very difficult place or a more difficult place to own real estate.
Yeah, and on top of that, I mean, I think 939 is one of the scarier bills I've seen, but because it changes contract law, and I don't think look, I didn't practice law very long, but I did do well in constitutional law. I don't see how it's constitutional under the U.S. or the California state constitution, but it's going to cause noise and it's going to create more uncertainty. I think the split roll is just horrible, and if you just basically say you want to add more tax on California business, that's what you're doing, because those things get passed through. And then I think the moratorium on evictions is, we have a system set up, and it's capitalistic, and that's what it is. And we have a system set up for bankruptcy, and we have a system set up for evictions. And I just think it's inappropriate for us to go be much beyond the stay in shelter. I understand with the stay in shelter, but that's going to be over very soon. And to say that just arbitrarily gets extended out and out, and I think it's two things. Number one, it destroys the system we have set up. But number two, it's really not fair to the tenants in the sense that the government's not saying you don't owe that rent. They're just saying you can't be evicted. And I think people are thinking that they can get away from not paying rent, whether it's an apartment or an office space. And I think it's going to cause a lot of turmoil when the bill does come due, because it will. I mean, it's a horrible force taking this shutdown has been due to a pandemic. It's been horrible. But the way the rules are shaping up, it's looking like the landlord and the owner is going to be chosen as the bad person, because the tenant is getting relief from eviction and perhaps under 939 paying rent and getting out of lease, and the lenders aren't getting saved by the government. Well, that's not right. And it's going to cause huge problems that'll hurt everybody. And I just think the government's got to stop. As soon as we are out of the bunker, we got to get back to where the rule of law and contract law is.
So I want to rapid fire with you guys real quick, because I want to stay on that topic here, but because we have a lot of people that are texting and emailing on the side right now about cleaning. So just sort of a rapid fire here. Do you expect operating expenses in buildings to go up substantially because of new cleaning measures?
Yes.
Yeah. Probably about $1 a foot, is my guess.
Yep. I'm in agreement.
$1 a foot per year.
Yeah, per year.
That's a huge number. That's a big number. Okay. Are either of you planning to manage visitors in any different way than you did pre-COVID?
We were pretty strict about how we manage our buildings to begin with, but we are at one of our projects, we're testing electronic ticketing. That's something that's being used at the Broad. And if that works there, we're going to go to our other buildings where you would sign in both as a tenant or a guest and literally get an electronic ticket to go on the elevator. You check in and go on. And if that works, we may use it at our other buildings.
How many people are getting on that elevator? How many people are getting on that elevator, Chris?
It depends on the building, but our smaller elevators, it's 2 people.
Yep.
But we have opened up our stairwells. I mean, outside of one Cal, most of our buildings are not, 50 stories tall.
Yep.
And the Trust building, just a little pitch, we do have operable windows. So all the people who want that fresh air.
It's a great building. That's a great building.
It is a great building. Are you changing your cleaning, and how so, in any of your buildings going forward?
We are, we're doing a lot more robust cleaning with antibacterials in our common area. For just about all of our buildings, we've added an extra cleaning person. And their rounds are much more frequent. So we're going to make sure that people are through the common area, once every, I don't have the specific, it's 2 to 4 hours, somewhere in through there.
Okay.
So yeah, we spent a lot of time on it. As I said before, we're going to go touchless with all of our fixtures in our common areas. So yes.
We're doing so. We created a group called Experience Optimization Services that's working with our tenants to talk about increased in the space, increased janitorial services, how we can help them space out desks, how we can help them with this elevator system. So I think what you're going to see is we're going to, over time, be adding even more day porters and things like that. I can't use the word high touch because we're not going to go touching them, but it's a high frequency of communication. And I don't think there's an AI out there that can do it alone. We certainly try to use building apps that work, but at the end of the day, I think it's all going to be about the confidence that the employee has in the office building and the representatives of the office building, making them feel safe and getting from the car all the way up to their space without having to touch anything, without having to be around a bunch of people. That's going to be the key over the next year.
And what about the car? My favorite question, especially downtown, valet, how does that work?
Well, I think we're working with our parking companies to make sure that they wipe down. And I think the evidence is pretty clear that it doesn't last on service long. So we'll wipe down when the person gets in, the valet gets in, and we'll wipe down when we go out and leave a note of what was done.
So you don't think this is the death of valet parking for a couple of years?
No.
Okay.
Look, I'm a cynical person, I guess, about this. I just think people are going to get back to their life as much as they can. And if someone really is that afraid, they're probably not coming to the office anyway.
Okay.
Well, turns out everyone can protest. So people are prioritizing already. So
yeah.
So back to kind of what you had mentioned earlier, and tenants and how they work and where they work and when they work. What's the future of co-working?
Yeah, that's a funny one. Yeah, I'll start it. I mean, look, I think in my opinion, I think, look, there's still a role for it. You know, the flexibility that people have in terms of having shorter term leases and having, if you're a large company, having potential multiple touch points around the country, I think is important. That being said, I think that it absolutely has to change. You know, the high touch or the high interaction density, I mean, all of those things are just a no-go right now. And I think when you look at, when you look at a WeWork space, and obviously there were problems with WeWork before, but when you look at how a WeWork space is built out, you know, the corridors are intentionally small so people, you know, bump into each other. I mean, not physically bump in, but, you know, so there's interaction and you know, their common area pushes people together, and, you know, there's a lot of shared amenities. And I think a lot of that has to go away. I think it's going to be interesting to look at, you know, some of these build outs. And so I guess what I'm saying is the enterprise stuff, the enterprise portion of it probably stays. The portion of it where everybody's together, I think that those layouts have to change. And I think that's going to be very expensive for a lot of these coworkers. I think you're going to probably see a lot of these co-work businesses go out, and maybe a consolidation under, you know, a few more well-capitalized groups. And I think it's going to be, at least in the near term, a much smaller footprint than it is now.
My thought on co-working isn't much different than Russ's, but I'll say, I look at it in a couple ways. Number one, I think with co-working, and what WeWork idealized, though I'm not sure they got there, was the importance of building a community in a building, having easy access to be able to get a conference room and fast internet and things like that. Really a hyper active property management service. And I think we've all learned from that, have tried to meet it. I think the idea of density is gone. I think the idea that you're going to have a membership in something that allows you to work in New York, London, Madrid, and then back in LA. Nobody was doing that anyway. It was a dream that wasn't happening. So I do think the legacy of co-working is going to be, every building will have certain space where you can work, whether it's in the lobby, outside, with fast internet. I think every landlord will look and say, hey, some of this space is tough to lease. Maybe I'll put my property manager on leasing it by the office or by an area. And then I think the biggest, and what I hope happens out of this, though I'm not sure we're there, is that we can start getting loans that allow us to have flexibility on term for 1 year, 3 year leases. Yeah. And I think the best landlords are going to come up with, just kind of like a hotel room, this is our best version of 10,000 feet, and our lender lets us do a year. But you know what? The sink stays where the sink is. You know, you don't get to move things around, and either you like it or you don't. And yeah, if we can get our lenders to give us that kind of flexibility, because we're only spending that TI once and we're not tailoring it to people, I think that will be a benefit out of what co-working has done for us. But I think the model that, the scary thing, let's look at how much leasing was done in the United States in 2019. I would say the majority of new leases was some sort of co-working product around enterprise or pure co-working. That's just gone, and that goes to our recession discussion earlier. So hopefully there's some good things out of it. I know we're certainly going to, in our new projects that we look at, we're going to be looking for lenders who give us that kind of flexibility to have at least a portion that is just like a hotel room. We designed it. We think it's great. We use Gensler. We use, SOM. We use whoever, and we think it's great and perfect for a 10,000 square foot user, and you can have it for 3 years.
Yeah, we actually, so we own a building in Hollywood, the Taft building, and it's got small floor plates. So it's, 10,000 foot floor plates. So we've got a lot of smaller tenants in that. And, we've started, two things we've started to do, to Chris's point, is one, we've started to do shorter term leases. So we'll look to do, like, for these smaller tenants, we will do 3 year leases, 2 year leases. And our lender actually does allow us to do that for a portion of the building, which is a good thing. The other thing we're doing is we're building out ready to use space. that actually is built out with desks and monitors and things like that, where tenants can come in who are ready to go, and they can plug and play and either use that as swing space or take that space. We haven't built it out yet, but I think it's going to be interesting for us to see, how well that gets used. I think that, at least prior to COVID, was a perfect market for that kind of space and a perfect building for that.
Mm-hmm.
But we do see that as an innovation that came from a WeWork, type or co-working type situation.
Yeah, we just had a call with an owner yesterday. We had planned to build out a spec suite and spend, $100 a foot. And obviously many capital partners don't want to do that right now. So we said, okay, what if we just do kind of the bare bones, like Chris, you said, and get approval to do a 1 year or an 18-month, 24-month, whatever it is, and don't spend quite as much money, but just make it flexible, because I think we've learned from a lot of our clients, co-working as a model was really a solution for a flexible office. That's the benefit of, that's what everyone has liked about co-working. I don't think people care, as some do, but care as much about beer and kombucha and fighting over, a conference room reservation system. But if we can have flexibility because we're a startup, we don't know where our business is going, or we're growing, or we're shrinking, or whatever it is, then there's some real estate solution to that. But I think you're right. It ties to capital partners and lenders for sure.
So does that change anything? Does that change the way that if you were building a building today, I don't know if you guys are developing anything right now, but if you were building something today, would you build it differently because of where we are now versus maybe what you were thinking 4 months ago?
Well, I think we were already thinking about all these new ways we wanted to do things, and this is just sped it up. We think health and wellness is still unbelievably important. We thought it was in January. We think flexibility of space. More and more we're working with furniture vendors. How do we build the industrial equivalent of a white box that we can then furnish and move walls because it's with furniture? I think that the best, not best, there's nothing great about a recession and all that, but the lessons you can learn out of it is you can finally talk to people who have very firm points of view from the lending side and capital partner side and say, this is where we're headed, and they're more willing to do it. I think we were headed that way anyway. I really do. I think, but I think, as with all things, I think COVID just basically put us 3 years faster along the path than we were.
Russ, what about you?
We all feel the speed issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I don't think we would do anything different. I think, the same things are important. Natural light's important. I think, volume's important. I still think that if you're building a building, you're going to build the long-term trends rather than short-term trends. And I still think that the sense of community and common area and, a little bit of mixed use work-life balance is still very important. I think we were transitioning over to more mid-rise, low-rise, creative type buildings from, building something from the ground up. I'll tell you one thing that really opened my eyes to how important all this was watching the C3 project in quote unquote Culver City. That project was, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, that area is very, medium. It's not downtown Culver City, it's medium, but, it was so well built that, tenants flocked there and you're able to create a lot of value. The same types of things, the same types of features that are in this building or in that building would be the same types of features we would look to build in a new building today.
Yeah.
Funny, I have a story about that I'm not sure I want out there in the world, but I'll tell it real quick. But you may know this, we put red light management in that building on one floor. And for those of you that don't know it, it's a 6-story, 34,000 square foot floor plate building. And we were trying to get the last few pieces. As a tenant rep guy, you can appreciate this. We were in the room with the landlord trying to get the last few pieces. And I looked at the landlord, I said, Dave, don't ever forget, you're still on Bristol Parkway. And he looked at me, he goes, you clearly don't get the project then, Ryan. And he didn't give us a thing. So But we're very intimately familiar with that. And we thought that was the future a long time ago. When we put red light in there 3 years ago, or when we started negotiating with them 3 years ago there, we thought that building had a lot of the characteristics of what people still want today, that outdoor space, that open air, those patios. They've got a lot of amenities right there without having a lot of amenities already built in, restaurants, retail, et cetera. So you're absolutely right about that. To come down to the last few things on ownership responsibilities and things, do you think that your responsibilities as owners or tenants' responsibilities change going forward? It doesn't sound like either of you are going to ask tenants to opt in to temperature testing or anything like that in your buildings, which we've heard from a number of owners. Do you think that their responsibilities change at all? And are you expecting big changes, long term, or do you think this is a short term pre-vaccination situation?
Look, my sense on this is our responsibilities do change in terms of, but I don't think the area in which we manage changes. And it may be a weird way to say it, but I think we're responsible, and the way we're looking at this is we're responsible for the building rules, we're responsible for the common areas, and then once you're inside your space, that's your responsibility. And we've had a lot of debate about it, and I think we talked about it a little earlier, and that in a lot of ways, if you take that responsibility further, you are impinging upon the flexibility of people to operate their own businesses. And we're not in the business of trying to dictate how people operate their business. So from a common area perspective, in terms of cleaning, in terms of safety, if there's an emergency at the building, we spend a lot of time on, if there is a COVID case, how do we handle it? How do we notify people? What can we do if there's somebody sick and needs to be taken out of the building? All of that is our responsibility. And I think all of that changes because of COVID and how diligent we are and how well prepared we are for that. But the responsibility, once it comes into your shell, I don't think changes, at least in our mind.
We
Chris,
did get a, hold on one second. We just got a question on text about that. If there is a case.
Yeah.
What do you do?
So we've had several in some of our buildings. We've had it in Denver, not as much in LA. I think Russ is absolutely spot on. And so in Denver, look, at the end of the day, we only know if there's a case is if the employer reports it to the CDC and reports it to us. So the responsibility really falls on the employer. Once we know that there's a case, we have specialized cleaning crews that go in. We make recommendations to the employer of doing contact tracing with that employee, knowing who they talk to. The CDC suggests they are quarantined now for 10 days instead of 14. And we come through with a cleaning crew and we clean the whole space. I think at the end of the day, though, Russ hit all the issues that we can only do so much. And I think we've always had to provide a place that felt secure and safe and allowed people to do business and not get in the way of what their businesses were. And, this goes back to whether you allowed dogs or not, or stuff like that. You really had to cater to the tenant. But I think one of the things that's going to really jump out to us is the responsibilities that go to the employer about culture and how you create a business that makes money have just grown immensely. And the amount of trust people have to have, in Pennsylvania, the Republican side of the state house didn't tell the Democratic side that somebody had COVID and there was all this, uproar about it and you're killing me. Can you imagine an employer if an employee doesn't tell somebody what that's going to do? So I think this is all going to be much more in the employer's hands than the landlord's hand. That does not mean that we don't have huge responsibilities. Our responsibility is to get people from their car or when they enter the building to their space safely. And we are going to do that in every way we can, but we think the biggest way is to just have a high frequency of communication, a presence of cleanliness, a presence of cleaning things, a presence about not jamming people into elevators, allowing people to go upstairs where we can. But at the end of the day, it's up to the employee and the employer, and there's not much more we can do.
Well, we have very quiet on the Q&A front, so maybe everyone on the web is just as interested in this as I am, but we'll wrap it up with the question we always like to ask, just to end on a positive note, especially with everything going on in the last week. But what is the most positive thing to come out of this, either for you personally or your families or your companies or
the world didn't end, not that we thought it would, but this too shall pass. And, being in business is not all roses, and it hasn't been since the start of people doing business. And offices have been around since the 1800s. I don't think they're going away. I think just like in that Dolly Parton movie, offices have changed immensely. Those office buildings still, for the most part, still exist, but they've changed in how they operate and how they do things. And I think Russ's company is a really amazing company, and we admire them and we want to be like them. I think for people like us, it gives an opportunity to distinguish ourselves against staid old real estate investors. And, if I hear one more person, equity person, well, I don't know if we want to invest in California, I'm like, that's going to be your mistake. We're still the 5th largest economy in the world. I know the governor's not supposed to say we're a nation state, but we are. We have an amazing economy. We produce amazing things. Owning office is still going to be a good investment in California. Living here is still going to be a good investment. And I'm sitting outside on a June day working on an Apple computer. This is about as California as you can get, right?
are you wearing socks?
I am today, but I'm wearing workout clothes. That's the one thing I do hope that goes away. I've been in downtown a lot lately. No more suits, no more sport coats.
Right, I told you.
Jen called this 5 years ago. She called it 5 years
ago.
ago. I told her I'd never take it off, and here I am. I definitely have flip-flops on underneath this. So.
I'm sitting here with no shoes and no socks on. So,
what about you, Russ?
Yeah, look, Chris, I appreciate what you said, and we admire what you guys have done. I think you guys are best in class in terms of operations and what you guys do too. And, I think from a corporate standpoint, probably the positive that came out of this is, look, anytime you go through big changes like this, it's a time to reevaluate how you do things and how you operate. And, through here, I think we've been able to, we've had all of our building managers get together with, our asset managers and really talk about, okay, how do we become more efficient in terms of a cost perspective? How do we become more efficient in terms of process? And then, so that helps us in terms of looking at running our buildings. I think too, the positive and negative interaction we've had with our tenants, in terms of negotiating rent relief or, having to talk about unpleasant issues of COVID, I think has helped us, number one, develop better relationships with them, understand their businesses a little bit more, meet the people a little bit on a deeper level, and hopefully will give us, a better working relationship and help us, make them a better business, and hopefully they stay at our buildings for a long time and come to other buildings. And, so from an introspective and from an operational standpoint, I think we've gotten a lot of positivity out of it.
Yeah, I agree. It's been a fascinating few months. We keep telling people, we are really good about doing business plans. I think our team is very good about it. Every December we do it towards the end of the year, and we had to completely flip it on its head, come about mid-March this year. And so for us, I think the ability to pivot and understand landlords and ownerships, as well as we think we understand tenants, and then furthermore, really try to understand tenants because their needs have changed so much over the last 3 months. We've done, as I started with at the onset of the call, we've had 4 calls, all were relevant at the time, and it started with deferrals and abatements and force majeure and business interruption and all of that, and very quickly went to, how do we do this? What does coming back look like? Clean policies, and so we are incredibly grateful to have the two of you on. It's been really, really fun to do this with you and get prepared here over the last couple of weeks. We're really appreciative that you guys took the time. We love working with you and putting tenants in your buildings. And so thank you guys very much for joining. We hope you and your families are all well and remain healthy. And we look forward to seeing you not on a Zoom here soon.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks, everybody. And also, just an aside, because Ryan always forgets. We
I
are going to
do.
be sending out a survey to everyone, all of our clients, everyone on the phone. And we are going to share the feedback, but kind of around what's going on, what you are looking for as we all move forward in kind of this uncharted water. So look for that from us later.
We also forget every time to promote Office Created and our Office Created Instagram, which is @OfficeCreated. So please follow that. And our website is officecreated.com. So there's my shameless plug there at the end after 4 of these, finally getting it right. So Chris, Russ, thank you. Thanks everyone for joining. We appreciate it. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
guys. Bye-bye.